Okay, you are watching Hatman Boxing Live. Let's get straight into some boxing news. So the first story I want to talk about here is Frank Warren saying that Tyson Fury will fight Alexander Usyk for 150 million pounds. Now, 150 million pounds is what in dollars? It might be close to 200 million dollars, something like that, there or thereabouts. So here we have a guy the other day who was accusing Alexander Usyk of being greedy, of saying that Usyk doesn't really want to fight Tyson Fury and he's just looking for money. And then the same guy the next day is saying that Tyson will only fight Usyk for 150 million pounds, $200 million. Is Frank Warren okay? I know I hear he had surgery recently. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I've heard, that he had surgery. He was in the hospital. Did they give him morphine when he was in hospital? Is some of that still in his system? Because the guy's just talking all kind of crazy stuff. Does he know how ridiculous he sounds right now? Coming out saying that Usyk's all about the money, but then saying Tyson Fury wants 150 million to fight him. What's he talking about? You see, with the Saudis, it's not about purse splits. That's why it's easier to get fights done there. The way fights normally work from a financial perspective is pay-per-view revenue. If you're talking about big fights, that's how both guys get paid, through pay-per-view revenue. And it's only going to be a certain amount of pay-per-view revenue, right? Let's say it does 1 million buys, 1.5 million buys, whatever it is. You then, before the fight, decide how much each fight is going to get in terms of a percentage of those pay-per-view buys. Yeah, obviously a certain percentage goes to the broadcaster and all that, but when all that's out of the way, whatever's left gets divided up between the fighters. And how much is each fighter willing to accept of the pay-per-view revenue? That's how it normally works with big fights. With the Saudis, they've basically got bottomless pockets. Yeah, that's how it is with the Saudis. They've basically got bottomless pockets. And so they've got an unlimited almost supply of money. They can pay the fighters whatever they want to pay them. I think I'm clipping a little bit here. Let me bring down my mic just a tad because, don't want to start distorting. But anyway, so they can pretty much pay the fighters whatever they want to pay them, right? Therefore, there's no need to get involved in splits and this and that and what's the other guy getting and pocket watching. You don't need to start pocket watching when you're dealing with the Saudis. You don't need to think about what the other guy's getting or anything like that. You just negotiate an amount that you're happy with, and that's it. Yeah, you must have in your mind as a fighter an amount that you think not just that the fight is worth, that the risk is worth. Because if Tyson Fury is asking for 150 million pounds, all right, close to $200 million for the Usyk fight, that means he sees it as an extremely risky fight. There's no other way to interpret that. Yeah? Because he's not asking for that much to fight Anthony Joshua, is he? Fighting AJ at Wembley, which is what Tyson Fury's been talking about, over the past week or so. If he was to fight AJ at Wembley, he's not getting anywhere close to 150 million pounds. Not even remotely close. So what does that tell you about the way he sees the Usyk fight? He sees that as so dangerous. The only way, and when I say dangerous, I'm talking about from the perspective of him losing. Because Tyson Fury isn't afraid of Usyk the man. He's not afraid to be in his presence. He's not afraid to be in the ring taking punches off Usyk. What he's afraid of is losing the position that he's worked himself into at this point. Yeah, Tyson Fury obviously fought Klitschko, Deontay Wilder. He took risks in the past to get to the level he's at, where he can fill out stadiums and do pay-per-views and all this kind of thing. And most importantly, I think for Fury, let me not say most importantly, but one of the most important things for Fury is his ego. He likes people saying that he's the greatest ever. He likes being, thought about as the best of his generation, even though he hasn't taken the necessary steps to prove it, even though his resume doesn't really reflect that just yet. But, he likes people thinking about him in a certain way. If he goes in there against Alexander Usyk and gets beat, then all of that stuff goes down the drain. Yeah? People are going to completely rethink their perception on Tyson Fury. And Fury is cognizant of that. Understand? He looks at Usyk and he thinks, that's a dangerous fight. Do I really want to go there? I could lose everything I've built. And if I'm going to take that risk, I want crazy money. I want the kind of money that would cushion the blow of losing. On top of that, I think that Tyson Fury might be having issues with injuries. I know Alan Babich alluded to this a couple of months ago. He said that when he was in Fury's camp, Fury was just riddled with injuries everywhere. And so a guy who's riddled with injuries isn't going to be as confident in his ability as a guy who is fully fit. And interestingly, right, in the third Deontay Wilder fight, apparently, from what I've read, Tyson Fury's right elbow was messed up. And that's why he was getting close to Deontay Wilder. Because if you notice in the second Deontay Wilder fight, Tyson Fury was doing everything at long range, behind the jab and a long right hand. But in the third fight, he was all up close and he was on the inside. And that's apparently because Fury couldn't fully extend his right hand. Yeah, so he had to get close to throw it. So that's an interesting thing that, if his elbows are really messed up and there's different parts of his body that are messed up, that is going to make him less confident of going in there and actually beating Alexander Usyk. Maybe he's waiting for his body to recover. Maybe he's hoping that certain surgeries and therapies can bring him back to where he needs to be. Or maybe his body's just shutting down and he's closer to the end than we realize as a top flight heavyweight. We will see. But yeah, Frank Warren coming out saying this stuff, the irony seems to be missed on him. Is he okay? Is there still some morphine in his system from the operation or whatever the case? I don't know. Again, I'm not 100% sure that he did have an operation, but this is something I've heard. So you guys let me know what you think about that in the comments. And of course, there's other things Frank Warren's been saying, blasting this one, I'm blasting that one, as you can see on screen here. There's a boxing news interview he did, and then an IFL TV interview. Anyway, moving on to the next bit of news here. Eddie Hearn confirms that he sent an offer to Dillian Whyte to fight Anthony Joshua, and they're targeting August 12th. Now, I think this is the fight to make for Anthony Joshua because it's something real. Well, in fact, let me back up a little bit. I think there are fights out there from a stylistic perspective that would serve AJ better fighting a Deontay Wilder, going into a Wilder fight. But from a confidence perspective, I think the Dillian Whyte fight might be good. Obviously, it's dangerous. Dillian Whyte's got a left hook that could knock Anthony Joshua out. But from a confidence perspective, this is a guy he's knocked out before. So I expect AJ to be a bit more confident against Dillian Whyte than he was against Franklin because, with fear, a lot of the time it's fear of the unknown. He didn't know Franklin. Never felt his punches before. Didn't know his rhythm, didn't know his moves. He's been in the ring with Dillian Whyte twice before. Obviously in the amateurs, and then they fought in the pros many, many years ago. So there's a familiarity there. I think AJ will be more comfortable in the ring with Dillian Whyte than he was with Jermaine Franklin. Obviously, he knows Dillian Whyte can punch and it can all go pear-shaped if he makes a mistake. But I think that'll help bring up his confidence going into the fight. And if he wins well, let's say he knocks Dillian Whyte out, same as he did last time, and he doesn't take too much punishment, I think, again, the confidence will help him. The confidence he'll get from that will help him going into the Deontay Wilder fight. Not so much from a stylistic point of view because, again, the styles of Deontay Wilder and Dillian Whyte could hardly be any different, or could hardly be more different, should I say. So, yeah. Eddie Hearn says he sent an offer to Dillian Whyte. How much does Dillian Whyte think he's worth in the fight? That's the question. Eddie Hearn expects that he's going to have to send more offers to Dillian Whyte. He expects the first offer to be rejected because Dillian Whyte's going to want a lot of money. And, at this stage of their careers, Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua, it's last chance saloon potentially for the pair of them, particularly Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte has suffered a number of bad knockout defeats, knocked out badly by AJ, knocked out badly by Povetkin, knocked out badly by Tyson Fury, and he's been dropped a bunch of times, and he's been hurt a bunch of times. He gets hurt virtually every fight now, Dillian Whyte. So this could be the last ever time that he's involved in a pay-per-view fight, if this is pay-per-view, right? Anthony Joshua's last fight against Jermaine Franklin wasn't pay-per-view, so we'll see whether the Dillian Whyte fight is. But, yeah, I understand Dillian Whyte holding out for more money, but he can't get too greedy on it because at the end of the day, Anthony Joshua does have that Deontay Wilder fight at the back end of the year. And if that fight doesn't happen, he can just switch and go to a Fury fight instead. So AJ's got options for big money fights. Dylan Whyte doesn't really at this stage. So he can't start getting too picky and, funny about money, or else he might be left out in the cold. So that's my take on that. Let me know what you guys think about this potential rematch between AJ and Dylan Whyte. Do you think it will happen? Do you think Dylan Whyte will accept the money they offer him? Because, you still think that, well, I get the perception that Dylan Whyte still thinks he should be getting the kind of purses he was getting, 3-4 years ago when he was on that good unbeaten run, when he was knocking people out. And, things change. When you've been knocked out by Povetkin, when you've been knocked out by Tyson Fury, you can't be getting the same purses. And when I say knocked out by Tyson Fury, it wasn't a competitive fight. Yeah, it might be different if it was a competitive fight and he put up a good show. Then he might retain some value after that. But when you've been knocked out by Povetkin, knocked out by Tyson Fury, didn't look good against Jermaine Franklin. A lot of people think that he lost the fight. You can't then expect to get the same purses you were getting a few years ago. It don't work like that. So we'll see how realistic Dylan Whyte is. And I wanted to bring this picture up because look at Malik Scott in the middle there. I don't know what's going on with Malik Scott's face, bro, in that picture. But he looks like he's having a bit too much fun. Stood behind Eddie Hearn there. And look on the right with a TBS hat on. That's Baby Ting. Man looks mad young in that picture, a long time ago. A lot lighter as well. Anyway, moving on to the next bit of news here. Roy Jones backs Anthony Joshua's decision to delay the Tyson Fury showdown. Now, Roy Jones, of course, has had conversations with Anthony Joshua. There was some talk about maybe AJ teaming up with Roy Jones and Jones being his trainer. He didn't decide to do that, but Jones still gives his 2 cents on what he thinks AJ's next move should be. He was happy when AJ hooked up with Derek James. He thinks that's a good move. But he doesn't think it would be a good move for AJ to fight Tyson Fury next. So here's what he said. He said, why would anyone... So basically he's approving of AJ passing up the Tyson Fury fight for now. He said, why would anyone come off one of the worst performances they've had in a long time and go and fight Tyson Fury? How much sense does that make? Which one of us believes that based off his last performance that he would beat Tyson Fury? Who really thinks that? Excuse me. He goes on to say, you've got to get comfortable with your team first before you take a fight of that magnitude. He clearly doesn't have it together with his new trainer yet, so to fight the top guy of the division before having it together with your trainer, how stupid would that be? So no, you don't put him in with Tyson Fury right now. Let him get comfortable with his new trainer, then fight Tyson Fury. I think that's what he needs to do, whether he's going to fight Fury or Wilder, is have some more fights with his trainer. It's funny that some of these Tyson Fury fanboys can't understand the difference between AJ's position right now and Tyson Fury's position. Because they think that all the pressure that we're putting on Tyson Fury to fight this, that, and the other guy should also be put on AJ. It's like, what brand of crack are you smoking? Tyson Fury is a world champion. AJ is not a world champion anymore. He's just another contender like all the others who's lost 2 of his last 3 fights. And you think that you should match someone like that the same way that you match an incumbent champion. What kind of nonsense is that? Champions, if you're a belt holder, if you got a world title belt, you are staking your claim to being the best heavyweight in the division. That's what you're doing, calling yourself champion. Therefore, you have an obligation to fight the best available opponent each and every time you step out. But if you're just a contender, of course you don't have that same obligation, because you're not making any claim, official stake, being the best. You don't have a claim. You might say it, some contenders talk that talk, but you don't have a belt to back it up. You don't have a resume to, you know what I mean? How these people can't see the difference between AJ's situation and Fury's situation is beyond me. If AJ is a world champion again, of course, I'm going to be putting maximum pressure on him to fight the best, to unify and everything else. And when he was champion, he was trying to do those things. I mean, the $100 million offer to Deontay Wilder, tried to fight Tyson Fury a bunch of times. Yeah? So when somebody's a champion, pressure should be applied on them to fight the very best each and every time. But when somebody's a contender, they don't necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily put pressure on them to fight the very, very best. It depends where they're at in their career. If they're a contender that is screaming and shouting how they are the number one in the division and they want all the champions, then yeah, if they get an opportunity to fight one of the champions, I'd expect them to take it. As long as it's not a crazy bad deal, then yeah, they should be going through and taking that opportunity. But anyway, let me not get bogged down talking to the Fury fanboys because most of them can barely tie their shoelaces. They've got IQs on a kindergarten level. Let's move on to the next bit of boxing news here. So Regis Prograis says he loves the Devin Haney fight. He says he thinks he'll stop Devin Haney. What do you guys think about that? Going into some detail here. Regis Prograis says, I love that fight. Devin is in a tough spot. He's got to fight somebody because a lot of people thought he lost to Lomachenko. So he's in a really tough spot right now. He could go up to 140. He could stay at 35. He could fight Loma again in a rematch. Or he could fight Tank. Or he's got to fight Shakur Stevenson. Or he can come up to 40 and mess with the bigger guys up at 40. So I think he has to do something big. If he wants to fight me, I'm with it. All right, that's what Regis Prograis is saying. He's with it because, of course, Devin Haney, it was revealed by Eddie Hearn, recently reached out to Eddie Hearn, who signed Prograis, and Haney's looking to fight him. Haney's saying, yeah, I like the look of the Prograis fight. So presumably, Haney thinks that Prograis might be the softest touch at 140. Obviously, Teofimo Lopez and Josh Taylor are tied up fighting each other. And I'll come on to that maybe in a different stream. But I don't know, I can't help but thinking Haney looks at Prograis, especially with his age. He's up there in age, isn't he, Prograis? Was he 33, 34? And I can't help but think, obviously Lomachenko's up there in age too, but I suspect that Haney doesn't think Prograis is as good as Lomachenko. I think, again, he might be right, he might be wrong, I don't know, but that's what I think is going on in his head. He looks at Prograis and he's like, you ain't as good as Lomachenko. You're a bit old, getting a bit long in the tooth. I don't think you were ever that good to begin with. You lost to Josh Taylor. I can take you at a higher weight where I've maybe got more energy. You know what I mean? I think that's the way that Devin Haney's looking at it. And Regis Prograis is like, okay, if you think I'm food, actually, I think you're food. So let's move on to the next bit of the quote here. So Regis Prograis said, I think I'll stop him. I think I can hurt him, not disrespectful. You look at the shots that Loma hit him with, and Loma is a 30-pounder. And I'm a 40-pounder, and I've been a 40-pounder my whole career. And I got a lot of knockouts. So if I hit him with the same shots, I feel like I'm going to hurt him. So yeah, that's the angle that Regis Prograis is coming from. He thinks that Devin Haney ain't got no smoke for him. He's got all the smoke for Devin Haney. So what do you guys think about that? And finally, this is something I didn't touch on at the time, so I just want to talk about it briefly here. Lawrence Okolie and Eddie Hearn came to a settlement. Lawrence Okolie put out this statement, which read, and yeah, they came to a settlement because some people were assuming at first that maybe the legal case has been dropped. But no, there was apparently a court ruling on, was it the previous Monday or 2 weeks ago on Monday? There was a court ruling, yeah? And so this is what Lawrence Okolie said afterwards. He said, I'm pleased to confirm that Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing, and I have collaboratively concluded a settlement. I would like to express my gratitude to Eddie Hearn and Matchroom for their guidance and support throughout my career, from my professional debut to becoming a world champion, and for the opportunities to win various titles along the way. In the heat of our discussions, statements were made that were regrettable. Nevertheless, I am pleased to have ended things on good terms with Eddie and Matchroom, and I'm glad that we can put this behind us and I can fully focus on the next stage of my career. I would like to emphasize that the particulars of our resolution will remain confidential, and I will be not making any further comment on the matter. So, reading between the lines, then, he obviously can't talk for legal reasons. That's part of the settlement. He can't actually give detail about what really went on. But the interesting thing is, I've seen several interviews with Eddie Hearn where he's basically expanded on the Okolie thing. And Hearn is making it as blatantly obvious as possible. Right? He's saying that I'm happy with the settlement, the contract was respected, and all this kind of thing. The contract was respected. To me, I'm taking that to mean Lawrence Okolie had to buy his way out of the contract. Yeah. And not only did he have to buy his way out of the contract, I'm assuming, he also, as part of the settlement, had to basically grovel and talk about what a great job Eddie Hearn did for him. And this is something that Johnny Nelson, I think it was talking about, how Matchroom have got like lawyers on the payroll. Yeah. Lawyers who they pay a salary. This is what Johnny Nelson is saying. And if you're a fighter, you don't have lawyers on a payroll. You got to pay lawyers by the hour, right? So you can't compete. A promoter like Eddie Hearn can drag a legal situation out much longer than you can. His pockets are deeper than yours. His money's longer than yours. And he's got lawyers on the payroll. He doesn't have to pay them by the hour. Again, according to Johnny Nelson. So how long do you want to stretch this out for in the courts? I can drain your resources all day long, is Eddie Hearn's mentality. Yeah. And maybe Lawrence Okolie realized, okay, this is not going the way I thought it would go. This is not going the way I wanted it to go. I'm just going to have to acquiesce to everything Eddie Hearn wants from me. And Eddie Hearn being in that position maybe got a bit spiteful, a bit vindictive, a bit megamaniacal, a bit sadistic even. And says, yeah, not only do I want this guy to financially compensate me, but I also want a groveling apology publicly. And on top of that, he's not allowed to talk about the details of the settlement, but I will basically come out and strongly hint at what the details of the settlement were. I'm happy with the resolution. I feel like the contract was respected finally, and all this kind of thing. Very happy with it. So he's saying all that and Okolie's not. And I really want to go back to something that Lawrence Okolie said in the midst of all this. Because people are focusing on, and look, whatever you think about Lawrence Okolie as a fighter, that's by the by. I'm focusing on the relationship between Okolie and the promoter Eddie Hearn. Excuse me. Because we all remember when Lawrence Okolie came out with that tweet where he was insinuating or he was comparing Eddie Hearn to Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Django, which was a slave owner. And people are thinking that came out of the blue. But Lawrence Okolie would later reveal that he put that tweet up because when he tried to leave his Matchroom contract, Matchroom all of a sudden got wicked on him, for lack of a better way of describing it. And they told him, no, you're not leaving this contract. You still got one fight left with us. And, you're not allowed to talk to the media about what's going on between us right now. And while Lawrence Okolie wasn't allowed to talk to the media and he was getting all these legal letters telling them to shut up, yeah? While that's all going on, Eddie Hearn is talking publicly about the Okolie situation. So for Okolie, he's very frustrated that he can't talk because he's getting all these legal letters, but Eddie Hearn can talk. You know what I mean? That's kind of a wicked type situation where Eddie Hearn's all smiles and he's all charismatic in front of the camera, all banter and all this kind of thing. But behind the scenes, he's sending legal letters and telling a fighter, you'll be sued if you talk publicly. It's very different from his public face, Eddie Hearn. You know what I mean? Excuse me. Getting a tickly throat over here. So, yeah, it was the frustration of that, of being told you can't speak about this situation and Eddie Hearn's out there all smarmy and he can say what he wants and Okolie can't talk. That's why Okolie put that tweet out months later. Yeah, so when you contextualize that tweet, it's not quite so outrageous. Do you know what I mean? It's not quite so bad. And you look at Eddie Hearn in the O'Hara Davis situation. Now, whether O'Hara Davis knew about Hillsborough or not, obviously O'Hara Davis was he even born when Hillsborough happened? I don't think so. So, or maybe he was just a very small child. So, whether he knew about Hillsborough or not, it's the duplicitousness, the duplicity, should I say, of Eddie Hearn. Because publicly, after O'Hara went his own way and joined Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn was out there in interviews saying that they had to let O'Hara go. Yeah? And I guess you could see that is what he did, but he made it seem as though it could be construed to people as though he actually kicked O'Hara to the curb, basically. That's the way he kind of made it out to be, or it could be interpreted that way by the fans. But at the same time, saying we had to let O'Hara go, O'Hara Davis said that Eddie Hearn offered him a deal, right? A new deal, because he was out of contract when that whole thing happened with the Liverpool comments or the Sun newspaper comments that O'Hara made. O'Hara says they threw him under the bus. And then, anyway, you guys would have seen the confrontation that O'Hara Davis and Eddie Hearn recently had at that boxing show, where O'Hara Davis said to Eddie Hearn's face, "You offered me a new deal. Yeah? You called me up, you offered me a deal. I took Frank Warren's deal for a few grand more, but then you go on these interviews claiming that you had to let me go. You didn't let me go. You offered me a deal." And Eddie Hearn never denied it. He just said he couldn't remember it. Saying that he couldn't remember it is, as far as I'm concerned, that's as good as admitting it. That's as good as admitting it. So, again, it's Eddie Hearn being devious. It's Eddie Hearn being deceptive. It's Eddie Hearn being duplicitous. And it's not just Eddie Hearn, obviously. This is what a lot of promoters are like. Take a sip of my water so I don't have to cough again. This is what a lot of promoters are like. But the difference with Eddie Hearn is that fighters get lulled into a full sense of security with Eddie Hearn, or a full sense of friendship. Because, with Frank Warren, when you sign with him as a fighter, you know that Frank Warren's not your friend. You know that this is just a business arrangement. This is not any kind of friendship. Yeah, you're not going to be socializing with him or going out to eat very often or anything like that. Maybe when you originally sign for a photo opportunity, you'll go out to eat with Frank Warren, right? But he keeps a distance from most of his fighters. And maybe that's for the best, I don't know. But as a fighter, you know what it is. But with Eddie Hearn, some of these fighters are naive enough to think that Hearn is actually their friend. They shouldn't be thinking that way, but some of them are. And O'Hara Davis admitted that he kind of got caught up a little bit in thinking that Eddie Hearn's his friend and Eddie Hearn's got his back and, this, that, and the other. No, Eddie Hearn doesn't have your back. Eddie Hearn is not your friend. Eddie Hearn is there as long as you're making him money and as long as you're not making him look bad, then he'll be there putting you on his shows and all that kind of thing. Yeah? But outside of that, if you're no longer making him money or if you're making him look bad and he doesn't think that you're worth the hassle, because obviously the Conor Benn thing has made Eddie Hearn look bad, but he thinks money-wise it's worth to stick with Conor Benn because there are some big money fights out there for him. So he's decided to bite the bullet on that one. But with an O'Hara Davis, he wasn't willing to bite the bullet. He'd already been beaten by Josh Taylor at that point. And Eddie Hearn was just like, nah, man, allow it. In fact, had he been beaten by Josh Taylor at that point? I think he had, right? I forget now. I think he'd been beaten by Josh Taylor by that point. I don't think he... Yeah, because Josh Taylor was with Cyclone Promotions, wasn't he? Back then. And I think that's when O'Hara was with Eddie still. So, but yeah, you know what promoters are like. If they think that you're useful and there's some commercial mileage in you, some financial mileage in you, they might tolerate certain things. But, when it looks like you're not useful anymore, when you're not going to be that good, when they can't make that much money out of you, all of a sudden, they're throwing you under the bus from a PR perspective. And that's really what O'Hara Davis wanted to get straight about Eddie Hearn, is that Hearn threw him under the bus from a PR perspective, in terms of the media and the public narrative. But he didn't release him from any contract. He didn't refuse to work with him again. That's what he claimed, apparently, after the fact. But behind the scenes, he actually offered O'Hara another contract. And so when O'Hara confronted Eddie Hearn about that recently at that show, Eddie Hearn said, so what are you complaining about then? Yeah, if I offered you another contract and I was willing to work with you still, then why are you complaining? And again, O'Hara was saying, it's just the way you're saying one thing behind the scenes and a different thing publicly, Eddie. You're being duplicitous. That's the issue I got with you. Anyway, I'll leave it there. That's today's boxing news. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to this channel. This will be where I'm doing all my live streams. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. I'm out.